Hello, Lumineers! It is time to take a rest from your quest and check on in to the Lore Keeper's Inn. I'm your host, Katie, and today is the final episode in my very first edition of the Ultimate Guide to Disney Lorcana Limited Archasia's Island Edition. So we are on the precipice of the new set coming out. So I'm releasing this on Thursday. The new set comes out on Friday, which means people will be doing limited all weekend. So sealed, draft, all of it. My goal is to have one more video to really wrap up what I learned in this process, go over a few of the key pieces of data. I'm going to go ahead and release my spreadsheet so that way you guys have a chance to look at it and make your own conclusions, really kind of dive in, save a copy, make your own notes. Data is beautiful. Then I'm also going to talk about my 10 favorite cards from this set. Also, I'm going to impart some wisdom so that way you have fun, because obviously the goal is to win, but having fun is also pretty important. But without further ado, I wanted to just briefly touch on the rating system. So I had a few questions where somebody said, well, why are evasives? If evasives are so good, you rated some of them kind of low. And the way that I took the rating system and the way that I think can be helpful for limited is to really think about first pick and then second pick, third pick, fourth pick. Because if you think about it as like, this is a great card, this is a bad card, it can kind of make things muddy and hard to make a decision. So the reason I did it this way is so you really can see their 5-star cards are one that you're like, well, I want to keep. I'm almost building around these cards, but they're so good that you don't even need to build around them. They're just good cards. And then 4 down to 1 is basically, I'm going to keep going through my cards over and over again and filling out my deck, looking at things like curve, ink ability, things like that. So I highly recommend if that's something that makes you feel like, I don't really know what you're talking about. I do have a video, Intro to Sealed 101, that really goes into the curve and how you want to have that built out. But just because a card is rated 3 stars does not mean it's a bad card. It just means I'm not picking it first. I'm probably going to, that's going to be after I have all the cards I know I want to keep. Then I'm going to be looking at my 3 stars and then maybe the 2 stars. So I just want to clear that up, because that's how I approach limited, and it helps me kind of get through the mess of the noise of all the cards that you might have in front of you. One thing that was very important for me in this series was to really look into the data. I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't just saying, I like this card, I don't like this card, because the cards are going to be good or bad depending on the context of the cards in the set. For example, if 50% of the cards are evasive, then suddenly evasive becomes a lot less valuable. The first thing I looked at is the cards per cost. We're just looking at, how many cards in each cost do we have. So obviously we're looking at the majority of the cards are going to be falling through the 1 through 4 cost, with only a few cards costing, a total of 5 cards costing 8 or more, which makes sense. And in limited, you don't want to have a ton of cards that cost more than even 6, because it can be hard. You only have 40 cards in your deck. You have to prioritize getting to those higher ink totals. Another thing we talked about was what the breakdown was, how many actions, songs, characters, and items. Obviously, this set is just resplendent with characters. We have 173 characters, 14 items, 12 actions, and 5 songs. So that's why in this series you hear me kind of dogging on songs a little bit, because songs aren't as valuable in this set. And it's especially going to be related to the cost of those things. The other thing is the ink type breakdown. As you can see, my videos on the single inks were shorter than the one on my dual ink, because there were 60 dual inks and 24 of each of the regular inks. That is something that pretty much doesn't matter in limited, only because you can pick whatever card you want. The ink doesn't matter. You're just building 40 cards. So it's very exciting to see the dual ink in limited, because as we saw in our dual ink video, a lot of the most powerful cards are in the dual ink category, which makes sense because in constructed, it's trying to temper the fact that, hey, you have to play this ink combo so you get a little boost. In theory, the card is stronger because you're committing to those 2 ink colors. But in limited, it's unlimited as far as what your ink combinations can be. Another thing I looked at is what is the cost and card type breakdown. And that's when I mentioned things like songs. So when we look at the songs, the most expensive songs out there are 5 cost. There's only 2 of them. The other one is 2 at 2 cost. And then we have 1 at 1 cost. So songs are pretty cheap. We also have our items. The most expensive item in this set is 3. 4 of them are going to be 3 costs. 7 of them are 2 costs, and then 3 of them are 1 cost. So when you know things like that, it kind of helps you judge how good a card is. For example, if something says it reduced the cost, or you have a singer, something with singer 5 becomes a little less valuable in the set because we know there's only 5 songs, and do we even need a singer 5 to get those songs out there? Another thing that I'm going to make sure to share with y'all is my spreadsheet. So on this, I went through each card and we have the cost, strength, willpower, key classifications, meaning things like magical, racer, words you'll hear come up, ally, floodborn. We also have our key abilities, things like bodyguard, evasive, key abilities that have things like card draw, lore gain. I included on the spreadsheet my rating and with a picture, so that's pretty cute, as well as the numerical rating. And then I also put the lore keeper's note, which is why I rated it what I rated. But keep in mind, this is my perspective. One of my favorite things about doing limited is it exposes your own personal biases. For example, my story that I will share is I thought water has memory was a 5-star. And you say, why? Well, water has memory is you take your opponent's deck and you draw 3 cards and then you can put 3 on the bottom and keep 1 on top. And I was like, that is so fun. I'm going to mess with them. And it turns out that's just me being petty and it's not actually a useful thing. I still really like it. But that's besides the point. People say it's a very bad card. And I had learned, and you get to learn those biases. You get to learn what you prioritize. I learned that I absolutely love aggro and I will sometimes higher rate things that maybe aren't as valuable just because I want to go fast and I want my opponent to go slow. But sometimes slow and steady wins the race. And this is a great way to learn. But I'm going to go ahead and share a link to the spreadsheet so that way you can have your own copy, make your own notes, or, print it out and be like, this is that time I watched 8 videos in a row from the Lore Keepers Inn. But now is my favorite part because we're going to talk about my 10 favorite cards. Now, these are my 10 favorite cards. If I said they're the 10 best cards, I think that is disingenuous because how would best is going to be circumstantial on what you pull and all that fun stuff. So these are going to have rares, there's 1 legendary, there's commons, uncommons. So these are my favorite cards, the cards that I'm hoping to pull and how fun that I think they would be. The first one is Bolt Superdog. This one has the ability of whenever you ready this character, gain 1 lore for each undamaged character you have in play. I think this is my bias of bodyguard showing because I would really love to just gain lore because this guy's getting ready. It'd be really nice with a bodyguard. I'm scared having him out there by myself, but I love this card. I think it's so fun. It's questing for 2. This is one where I'd be very excited to pull this card. I hope I can pull off some shenanigans with it where I put him out and, I drop 3 1-drops, something fun like that. Will it happen? I don't know, but he is one of my top 10 favorite cards. Moving along in numeric order, this one's not fun, but it makes sense if you look at what else I like. So this is the Prince, and he is a 0-5, and you might go, Katie, he has no strength. But look at that willpower. And on turn 2, imagine the things you could do having this guy just standing there. He took his hat off. He's standing just vigilant, blocking this path. And I love it. I love him for that. So you might not play him on turn 2. You might wait a little bit. Now, the longer you wait, the less valuable it becomes because the stronger guys are going to start coming out. But I do love a good bodyguard, and my goodness, I love a bodyguard that is 5 willpower. The downside, obviously, is he's not doing damage, which would be really great, but he's 2 cost. Think about how it used to be Simba, and Simba was a 2-3. This is 0-5. That's much bigger. Now we have the Prince, and with him is Snow White. I love this card in limited. She is a 4 cost, which is the only downside for me, but otherwise she is a 2-2, questing for 2, and she can't be challenged. There is not a lot of removal in this set, so you're requiring somebody to move damage, to basically have one of those ways where they're dealing or removing damage. And as we've kind of discussed in the videos, there's not many ways to deal damage. So because of that, I love her. I think you'd be able to get a couple quests out of her. She's kind of thwarting your opponent as far as making them pick, what am I going to do? I have this 1 removal. Do I want to use it on this 2-2 or do I want to use it on something really big and powerful? But she becomes powerful just by not being able to be challenged. Now we have another dog here. This one is a 5 cost uninkable lady. I love her because she's kind of sneaky card draw. Since she is a 5 cost, by this point, I should have some 1 or 2 drops in my discard. I might not, but obviously it's up to me when I play her. So I can return those 2 cards to my hand if they are in my discard when I play her. And I love anything that happens. It happens when she plays. In this case, I almost am guaranteed to get value, especially if I am making sure to get the value out of it. She quests for 2. She's a 4-4, which is a healthy stat for a little lady like her. So she is definitely a card that I'm hoping to pull. She's a super rare, so super good luck with that. But if I pull her, absolutely going in the deck. Now we're back to not a character, it's an action. And I love this card purely because it's remove 3 damage and draw a card. There's not a lot of card draw in this set. And being able to draw 1 card, being able to remove 3 damage, it means that you can do a challenge that maybe you were scared to do. Do your challenge, remove 3 damage, and then draw a card. So for me, this is a no-brainer, especially because it costs one ink. So there's literally no reason I would not include this card in my deck, because card draw is always beneficial, and removing 3 damage can help you sustain a character that possibly would have been banished the next turn. This next card is one where I am excited about it in limited because I oftentimes say, well, you're not going to put anything Floodborn just because you can shift. Universal Shift solves that problem. Baymax can be anything. So the fact that it heals, the fact that it is going to shift onto any card you have, it quests for 2, it's a 5/5. So you might not quest for 2, you might just shift, heal, challenge with that. And it really could come in like a wrecking ball. And I really love the versatility of this card. I love that basically he costs 4 for a 5/5 that quests for 2. I love this card very, very much. And I said in the video, I really hope I pull 6, 1 in each pack. That would be really cool for me, but we'll see. This card is one where it's tricky. I rated him 5 stars, and as time goes on, I'm like, but I'm still excited about him. And that is because he's got resist. He is a 4/3, and he can challenge ready damage characters. So once he's on the playing field, it's going to cause your opponent to possibly play a little bit differently. They know that you can challenge them even if they're ready once they have damage on them. So I like a card that makes your opponent think about what they're going to do next, possibly quest or not quest. Once they have the damage on the character, suddenly they've got a gizmo duck shaped target on their back. So I like this card quite a bit. I like that it deals 4 damage. I love that it has a resist of 1, because then you can really target things that ideally is not leaving much damage on them at all. So he is a card that I would really like to have in my deck, just to go ahead and hopefully cause my opponent to play a little bit more cautiously, or to be able to do a beatdown with a duck on a little unicycle. Moving on to Mushu. So Mushu's a rare, so there's a chance that I'm pulling him, but I really love this card. It is one that you get the ability of whenever one of your characters challenges, they gain resist 2 during that turn. And then also, whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. So you're just really beefing up your other characters. Him by himself, not super wonderful, but he's kind of like a really nice item. And so you don't have to quest with him. In fact, I might not if I have some other guys around him just doing mischief and getting that 2 lore and banishing characters. I mean, that's the best of both worlds. You sometimes have to pick between challenging or questing, and he's like, what if you challenge, you banish, and you get lore? It's like the best of everything that you could possibly want in limited. So you got 2 more cards left. This one's funny because it's really not that exciting, but it is Lady Cluck. She is a 2/7, and she's an absolute unit. She's a bodyguard. She has ward, which in this set is a little like, but that means that if they save up their little out of order card and they're like, I'm going to use it on Lady Cluck. No, you are absolutely not. You are not moving damage to her. She is sitting there and she's like, you can't. You must go through me. And mind you, she's only dealing 2 damage. So that part's not super impressive. But the fact that a lot of guys have to work together to get rid of this very large chicken lady, I love her. Obviously, the bodyguard thing comes back, that I love a bodyguard. I think it's a great way to ensure that your characters that you need to stay on the board, especially when they don't have a lot of ways to deal with things other than challenging. Somebody like this just standing there and being like, I'm a big chicken. What are you going to do? It's beautiful. It's a beautiful card. And this is my only legendary on here. But I think it's important to note that normally in limited, pulling a legendary can kind of be like, oh no, because they're very narrow in their usefulness. And this is a legendary that is pretty darn good for limited. So he is a 4/3. He is a bodyguard. Bagheera has, during your opponent's turn, when this character is banished, deal 2 damage to each opposing character. So the reason I love it is it's a bodyguard with a surprise grab your swords inside, which means grab your sword just deals 2 damage to all your opponent's characters. And that's what he's doing. He's like, fine, if you get through me, I'm a 4/3, so good luck surviving that challenge. And then once you do, everybody else gets 2 damage. So, I love this card for limited. I feel bad putting it in a legendary because, statistically you have 6 packs, you have 4 packs, but it could happen. And if it does, this is like an A+++++ card. I I love this card so much. That's all I have to say. I love it. So this is a part where I'm going to give you just my wisdom, the wisdom I have from staring at 204 cards across a week. The first thing I'll say is be wary of the fake synergies. So you're going to look at some things and go, oh, so this is going to work really well. And the synergies I'm telling you to look out for are the puppy pit of peril, items on a shelf. I know some people are like, well, you could have items. I think that's scary because the more time you invest in this item synergy, the more time you're letting your opponent play cards and quests while you're like, don't worry, I'm doing an item thing and it's all going to work out when I'm older. And so I think that could be a huge pitfall unless you are an absolute expert on navigating items and building decks around them. There's the Singer's No Song pitfall where you're pulling a singer because you're like, well, I know Ariel's good, but in the set, no, Singer's not good. Racers on an island. So you have 5 racers on Archasia's island, and that synergy makes it not super ideal for this. You don't want to build an entire deck around 5 racers. And then lastly, you have the illusion of illusions, where there are 3 illusions in the set. So some cards talk about, oh, if you have illusions, but realistically, you will not. There are only 3 in the set. Which brings me to, in the spreadsheet, I put things like your key classifications, key abilities. So as far as those key classifications, for things like Glass Slipper, there's 2 princes and then 13 princesses. I mentioned that there's 3 illusions, 3 puppies, 5 madrigals, 5 racers, there's 8 queens, 9 pirates, and then 60 allies. So of the synergies out there, allies is the strongest one. Now there's not a ton of cards that mention if you have allies, good luck. It's like Maid Marian is one of the few, but there's 60 of them. So that's one where you're like, okay, well that actually might pay off. But my only recommendation is when you have a card with synergies, pick the cards that are good by themselves and then go back later for those things that are like cards that call out, if you have allies, this card is good. Because you don't want to just pick allies because it makes this one card good. You want to have a bunch of cards that are good, and then this card is also good with it. As far as those really great cards, there are 3 cards with Rush, 6 with Bodyguard, and 13 with Evasive. Now, I think the evasives are good. A lot of the evasives comes with strings attached, where that's why some of them I don't think I rated any of the evasives 5 stars, just because all of them have kind of something where I'm like, oh, that's not so exciting. But do keep in mind, your evasives are something where you do want to kind of keep high on top of your keep pile, just because inherently if you have an evasive and there's no removal and your opponent doesn't have evasive, then even if it's like the lamest evasive, it suddenly is worth a lot more because it's just kind of flying above the battlefield and just questing and doing what it wants. So like I said, focus on your most powerful cards. Go through your remaining cards with the intention of finding the cards that enhance your picks or are just good on its own. So that's why I started at the beginning with the 5 down to 1 star, because that's not saying these are, if it's a 3 star, that means don't keep it. It just means these are the cards you're probably going to pick on your 3rd pass and then your 2nd pass. And then if it's your last pass and you have nothing left, then maybe a 1 star makes in there. I hope not. For your sake, I hope you don't have to put any 1 stars in there. And then the last thing I'll say is to think about how you can play characters that will outclass the characters of your opponent. And I'm putting here, thank you, Dick Burns, because that is something where I posted my sealed deck and he's like, well, look at what you played. How is that going to even survive 1 turn? And that's such a good point. Think about how you're putting out characters that are going to survive the next turn. Don't put out a character on turn 1 just because you're like, I feel like I have to, because it's something where if you're trying to get to that bigger end, inking is more important than maybe questing for 1. You want to pick something that is beefy, is going to survive, because if it's quest for 2, but only quest for 2 once, wouldn't you rather have something that quests for 1 4 times? Is kind of another way to think about it. So look at things with support, evasive, resist, and bodyguard. Those are extremely valuable in making sure that your opponents are going to outlast and outclass your opponents. These are just departing tips about limited in general. So my last part is just departing tips on limited in general. So the best way to get better at limited is to play. So sealed and draft is something where every time you play, you are going to learn something, win or lose. You're going to expose your biases. Like I said with that, the water has memory, and how I build decks that sometimes have 1-drops that are pretty much useless. You will see that there's certain things that you do without even thinking about, just based on the decks you've played in the past. So I highly recommend, when you are done with any limited tournament, to share your deck with friends or online. So join a Discord or something that is limited focused, and ask for feedback. It can really feel bad because it's always kind of hard when you're like, I believe in this card more than I believe in myself. And then everyone's like, oh, that's not good. But it's going to help you, because best case scenario is you're going to defend the card and I don't know, don't dig in your heels too much, but you might be able to open somebody's eyes to a card that they hadn't considered. But you also might learn that, yeah, you had a bias and you have to kind of go, oh, I guess you're right. So no matter what, you're going to learn something and you're going to become a better player. And the last thing I'll say is remember that limited does take skill, but like any TCG, there is luck involved. So don't let the outcome steal from the experience of it all. You're going to, no matter what, walk away with some knowledge and then also cards. So you already won 6 or 4 packs just by showing up to a limited event. So yes, winning is cool, but don't let that steal from the experience of just having fun and enjoying the fun of it, of building a deck that's just there for the night and you can't build in any other circumstance. It's so fun to get to play with the cards in a way that you don't get to most of the time. Oftentimes we open packs and if it's not, a legendary or one of the 5 great cards in the set, you don't play with them. And so I highly recommend signing up for a limited event. It's a really great way to get really into the local scene and to use the cards in a way that you've never used them before. And with that, that's the end of my series. We've talked about 204 cards. We've talked about my favorites. We've talked about tips. I want to hear your guys' feedback. Do you want me to do this again for next set? Is there anything that you're surprised about? Anything that you learned that you think you're going to apply in this season? I call it season. Anything you think you learned that you're going to apply in this set? I want to hear all of it. So absolutely comment below. And thank you so much for coming along on this journey. Like I said, I'm going to post a link to the data and spreadsheet that I use to make these videos so you can kind of go on your own personal data journey. But thank you again. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow. That always means the world to me. It's so exciting to have people join me on this absolute madness of staring at a spreadsheet. So thank you for coming along. As always, there is always more room at the inn. And if you don't know where to find us, just take the second start of the right exit and head straight on till morning.